in the football industry, I was amazed how much investment is made in Southeast Asia and China. Investment not just in the brands, but also in fan engagement, in youth development. And you know, doing business in this part of the world can be very challenging. But one of the challenges that not only the football industry faces, but to be honest, the whole of the entertainment industry, is probably one of the biggest existential threats that we all face, which is piracy. And the amount of money that these illicit syndicates can make is, of course, revenues that could go back into youth development, can go back into fan engagement. So it's something that I think all of us should take very seriously. Now, I just want to start by perhaps giving you a short landscape of what it's like in this piracy ecosystem. And you know, what you're seeing on the screen is, I suppose, the piracy walk of shame. You know, in 2003, we had P2P sharing. In 2006, cyber lockers. Since 2011, we've had perhaps one of the biggest technological systems directly impacting both football and the entertainment industry, streaming, piracy streaming sites. And then a few years ago in 2015, we had TV boxes, which were preloaded with infringing applications, or illicit streaming devices, ISDs, as we refer to them in the industry. And for those of you in the audience who aren't aware of what these illicit TV boxes looks like, this is what they look like. Syndicates that, for a fee, you know, offer thousands of entertainment channels. They provide all the best sports packages, all the best sports channels, live streaming, and obviously take away a large percentage of your customers. And again, all of this revenue is moved towards these piracy, organized crime syndicates. As an example of how bad this penetration of ISDs is in Asia, these are some stats of some YouGov research that Avia has been working with over the last 12 months. And the blue graphs show what the penetration is. So in the case of, say, Malaysia, 25%. So, you know, 1 in 4 online Malaysians have said that they use an ISD or an application, a legal application placed onto another device to watch their entertainment content. And of that 25%, 15% have said that they have, if they had a subscription to illegal services, they have terminated that subscription. So particularly damaging to our industry. Across the board, you can look at other ones, you know, Indonesia, 29%. So it's a real problem throughout Southeast Asia. But it's not all bad news. We have seen some forward momentum. Last year in November, in Singapore, a group of companies, including the Premier League, did the first blocking of illicit ISD applications. So there were 7 applications which resulted in the most popular ISDs in Singapore simply not working. So people who wanted to watch their Premier League or their LaLiga could not watch it, and they had to consider either moving to legal services or considering purchasing another illicit streaming device. Also last week, there was a judgment in a private criminal prosecution against an illicit streaming device seller. Again, a landmark case in Singapore. We've got in Taiwan recently copyright amendments to make the sale, the retail of illicit streaming devices a criminal offense. In Singapore, the government has currently undertaking a copyright review which will include illicit streaming devices being made criminally illegal. And in Malaysia, the Malaysian government are also looking very seriously at this particular issue. From an enforcement standpoint, we've had some success. One example is last year in Thailand, where there was a raid undertaken on a very large syndicate that I think Kevin will talk about in more detail, EPL with the complainant in this case, in which 150 police officers did a simultaneous raid on 19 cities across Thailand. Some of the police officers had body cams. There was a video drone above the syndicate's premises in Chiang Mai. The particular server was taken down, and Mike's team from beIN, who were monitoring it, found that there was 42 associated streaming websites of sports programs that were immediately went offline as well, because they were directly impacted by the main server being taken down. So again, a lot of success in Thailand. So finally, what can we do about this? Well, I think we need to look at two key strategies. One, like any crime, reduce the supply. Secondly, reduce the demand. And what we'll be discussing over the next 35 minutes is questions on both what are the problems, but also what are the solutions to both reduce the supply and to reduce the demand. So with that short introduction, I'll kick off the panel with, I suppose, a question on the problem. Kevin, online piracy, how much is it directly impacting your business?
It's changing the way that we've worked to try and tackle it. We've been involved in anti-piracy initiatives for a good decade or so now, I would say, but previously that was very UK focused, and it was mainly involved in pubs and bars who would be illegally bringing in broadcasts from outside the UK. And that was the major issue as we saw it. It's taken us some time, but we've pretty much dealt with that now in the UK. And of course, that shifts the problem to an in-home consumer issue, and that's much more difficult to tackle. So our focus has shifted to in-home piracy, and it has also shifted outside of the UK. And in the last 2 or 3 years, we've become increasingly engaged with our broadcasters from all over the world in trying to deal with this problem, because it's different depending on where you are. So it's not one size fits all. It's not that we can just take what we've done in England and plant it everywhere else. People pirate for different reasons. You have different solutions in market by market. People are dissuaded from piracy for different reasons as well, depending on where they are. So it's changed what we do and where we do it, I think.
In terms of loss figures, can you put is there a percentile figure you could put to that? Or is it difficult? No. Yeah, I know, it's increasingly difficult.
No, there isn't a percent. So many factors affect value in a market, but I think the fact that we're here in a non-piracy specific conference on this stage with these people speaking about piracy reflects how important it is now. It's become much more mainstream. It used to be a bit like a dirty little secret. Everyone's talking about it now, which is a good start, but we need to take it from beyond people sitting around chatting about it to people actually doing something about it.
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, the Asia Video Industry Association has sports clients, but it also has other people in the entertainment industry. And, certainly 3-4 years ago, again, at these conferences, it was a dirty little secret, but now it's been openly discussed and certainly recognition that it's a major challenge to the whole entertainment industry. Ivan, from a LaLiga perspective, how much is it impacting your business?
Well, here we are pretty aligned with what Kevin just shared. For LaLiga, obviously, piracy is a big threat for us. We have to bear in mind that audiovisual rights is the main source of revenue for LaLiga, well, not just for LaLiga, but for our clubs that play in the domestic competition. So, of course, this is a huge threat. The piracy rates as correlated with the TV rights, and then we are very committed, to face, this battle. Same as Kevin was sharing, we are trying to see exactly how we're trying to understand how we can best work in each of the different markets. So everything started back in Madrid, in Spain, in our headquarters office, where we have a full team dedicated, to fight piracy in the different departments that are involved, whether it's legal, compliance, or even TV rights. And also we have, I think we are the first league in the world to have our own in-house lab to develop our main tools, to fight anti-piracy. And then in order to be more relevant to the region, we take advantage of the network that we have with the international offices, as well as the LaLiga Global Network project, where we have 50 delegates across the world. So we have a better understanding on how to face, this threat in every single market.
CK, Astro, like LaLiga, like the Premier League have been very proactive in the anti-piracy space. You've got a content protection team. And you've been very outspoken in Malaysia about concerns and challenges that you face because of the threat from piracy. How much is it affecting the Astro business?
Definitely, you see a very direct impact to our bottom line because of piracy. Sports used to be the key driving content to any pay TV business. But today, because of piracy, you're seeing less revenue coming in from a subscription level. And obviously, all the leagues and rights holders like Kevin, Ivan, and all are seeing the impact. We used to be able to buy everything on an exclusive level or acquire the rights on an exclusive level. But today, we are acquiring more and more rights on a non-exclusive level because effectively it's non-exclusive anymore. So, and in Malaysia, we face massive challenges with the regulators in terms of working together with them because of the legislation. For example, let me give you a background. The Copyright Act is under the Ministry of Domestic Trade, whereas the technology for piracy falls under the Ministry of Communication. So we do need to inform one party, and the other party need to inform the other party before action can be taken. So a lot of lost time there. But I'm very appreciative of the Premier League today being in Asia, spearheading this. They are one of our many partners that actually took the initiative, and we meet on a weekly basis discussing action plans and the way forward. We just hope that the rest of the rights holders, as well as other platforms, do the same.
Mike, CK made a point about it even changing Astro's business decision. So how much does piracy directly impact beIN, and does it have an impact on medium-term or long-term business decisions?
Well, I definitely think that today piracy is the biggest threat, not only to beIN's business, but to the entire sports ecosystem, and in fact, even broader than that, to the entire sports and entertainment ecosystem. Piracy is destroying the business model that we all rely on. We are obviously seeing this first at the coalface from the consumer perspective, going back to platforms such as Astro here in Malaysia, back through then to channel and content providers, back to the rights holders, and eventually through to the leagues, the associations, and indeed the participants, the professional athletes themselves. Nobody is immune to piracy. Now, there are really two fundamentals in terms of how we're tackling piracy. One is technology, but the other is from a legislative perspective. And we've had some success in Asia, as you mentioned, Neil, and I think that will only continue. I firmly believe that it was technology that has, to a great extent, allowed piracy to become the problem that it is today, but I believe that it will be technology that in many ways will enable us to tackle piracy along with a legislative framework in each individual market. The problem becomes exacerbated when you don't have one of those two pillars that you can rely on to try and tackle piracy. And we're actually seeing this happen today. In the Middle East, there's an organization, a piracy platform called beIN, which is operating out of Saudi Arabia. It started in August of 2017 as part of a broader political issue between some of the markets in that area. But what has developed over the last 21 months is, again, probably the biggest threat to global broadcast, not just sports broadcast, not entertainment broadcast, but global broadcast. Because we don't have the fundamental of that legislator. There is no rule of law that we can rely on to try and combat the piracy that is coming out of Saudi Arabia. What happened since August of 2017 is that beIN started working, as you normally do, with your partners, rights holders, people like the Premier League, like LaLiga, to try and ensure that we could somehow stop the illegal theft of content in that market. We also looked very hard at technological solutions and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and understand how the content was being stolen and redistributed. Now, at that point, it was fairly nascent. It was, in many ways, the beIN channels only that were being stolen and distributed. But fast forward 18 months, we have now the most sophisticated piracy operation that has ever existed globally. As I said, we looked at the problem from a technology perspective. We haven't been able to solve that yet. And we do not have the rule of law to try and help us in that market, at least not internally. So what we've been doing is, again, along with our partners globally, is to try and build a coalition of the willing, if you like. That first started in late in 2018, where beIN took out a investment arbitration against Saudi Arabia for $1 billion US. That was very quickly followed up and supported by the WTO, who said that they would create a panel to adjudicate on that matter. In January of 19, things started again. There was momentum, and we first of all published a dossier of all of the instances of piracy that we had recorded with beIN, and again that goes far beyond sport, but it includes nearly every single sports event that has been broadcast globally since August of 2017. So every World Cup match, every match of the AFC Cup, every Premier League match, every LaLiga match, the list goes on and on and on. And of course, not, as I said, not just sport. When the Oscars were being announced, all of the Oscar-nominated movies were available on the beIN platform. Tens of thousands of illegally streamed entertainment sites, tens of thousands of movies, all accessible through a box. The piracy, the issue is that we've moved from a simple satellite piracy to online piracy to ISD boxes, which are then allowing access to all of this other content. And not only that, because that content itself isn't protected, the pirates globally are starting to pirate the pirates. So you have the situation where it's almost like a virus. There's certainly contagion. And piracy knows no bounds, doesn't respect any international borders. So now we're seeing this content widely available across the Middle East, now coming into Europe, coming into the US, and coming into Asia. If it hasn't come into your market, to your country, it will. If it hasn't impacted your business, your sport, it will. It is coming. So again, we are looking to the international organizations to help us. In February of 2018, actually, we saw the first impact of this. As I said, it's particularly seen at the coalface, at the consumer level, where they're accessing content for free or at least nearly free. And that trickles back through the economic chain, back to eventually the rights holders. In February of 2018, beIN took the decision not to renew our F1 broadcast. That represented, you were asking for percentages, that represented 7% of Formula One's global revenue. This is a big issue for everyone, and it doesn't stop. It goes all the way back. So that's 7% of revenue not available to teams, not available to partners within F1. And as sports cycles, this will continue to happen if we are unable to put a stop to the piracy. The latest action that we have been able to take is, again, along with some of the biggest football organizations globally, FIFA, the AFC, UEFA, LaLiga, Premier League again, Bundesliga, issued a statement condemning beIN. And then we had sports organizations and entertainment companies in the US petitioning the US Trade Association to include Saudi Arabia on their special watch list. And just this month, earlier this month, USTA not only put Saudi Arabia onto its special 2019 special 301 list, but it also listed beIN in an independent report as well. So we now have governments becoming involved, and I think at that level pressure has to be put on. Recently in the UK Parliament, Alistair Carmichael also raised the issue of BIQ and its impact on British business. And when he mentions British business, he's talking about Formula One, he's talking about Premier League, and every other business within the UK that relies on the professional execution of those leagues and their revenue streams and their business models globally. So we now have a coalition of the willing, if you like. We have the US government, the UK government, we have the EU government very aware and actively participating in this. We have the biggest leagues in the world, from FIFA, from the Premier League. We have entertainment organizations, the biggest studios in the world, also within this coalition. However, it hasn't all been plain sailing. At the same time as there's this groundswell of pressure being put on to Saudi Arabia, there are others within our own industry who are undermining that effort, who are staging events in Saudi Arabia in the full knowledge that this is impacting all of us, is the biggest threat to our entire industry. You've had golf events being staged in Saudi Arabia. The Dakar Rally has just announced that it's moving to Saudi Arabia. You've had the Italian FA make the incredible decision to stage the Supercoppa Italiana in Saudi Arabia. Against this backdrop that is impacting everyone in this room, certainly everyone on the stage. So, time is coming where we have a coalition of people who want to continue to support the sports industry, the entertainment industry, to ensure that we have a lively, growing industry, a live industry, and you have those who want to see the death of that industry.
That case is certainly, it's large, it's a very scary case, as you've made very apparent. I mean, there's a number of issues from that, I think, in terms of the roadmap for the sports industry, the football industry, and the entertainment industry. And certainly collaboration is one. Collaboration is critical. Obviously, issues around rule of law and the need for governments to catch up with technology is also critical. And unfortunately, there are some initiatives, strategies, which in this particular case, because it is very unique, it is very sophisticated, which may not be applicable. But I think certainly that particular case is and should be a wake-up call for everyone in the entertainment industry in terms of a worst-case scenario, a perfect wave. And this is something that obviously we need to address. Now, I think looking at reducing the supply, there are a number of initiatives that can be used and have worked. One is enforcement, the other is a form of site blocking, a form of disruption, intermediary engagement. The other one, of course, is technology, which you touched upon. So, Ivan, in terms of enforcement, I know that you've had a lot of success in South America and also in Europe. If you could give some examples of the type of enforcement that's worked, and also if you could touch upon what type of deterrent custodial sentences you've been getting.
Sure. For LaLiga standpoint, enforcement is split into short-term actions, so where we try to identify and try to get down some of the sites. We have our in-house tools that help us to identify some of these threats, and then we have also a longer-term enforcement where we work with the local authorities and try to make an impact, a bigger impact. So some examples of what we've been able to accomplish in Europe, in Denmark, or Peru, Mexico, and these countries, we have been able to shut down some of the top sites in the market where we have a biggest threat, identified, and more on the long-term enforcement strategy. We have been able in Brazil to work with some of the authorities to make sure that we were able to not just shut down the sites, but actually to blow some of the biggest networks that have an entire impact in a country like Brazil.
Kevin, the EPL, you've been very proactive in both the UK, Europe, but also in Asia, now that you've got a new office in Singapore. could you give us some examples of some cases that you've had, both in Europe and in Asia? And is there a difference in terms of the investigation, the strategic way you refer to governments between Europe and Asia, or are they pretty similar?
Similar-ish. So in terms of results, as David mentioned before we came on, we've just sent someone to prison for over 7 years for supplying ISDs, and his friend got 6 years, and the person that they employed got 3.5 years. That's a huge sentence for an IP crime. And that, I think more importantly, that's just not a one-off. So the UK courts are now increasingly recognising that this is a proper crime. So the year before, someone went to prison for over 5 years, year before that, over 4 years. So we've managed to build up a body of case law now in the UK where pretty much at the moment every year someone is going to prison for a long time. Now that is a proper deterrent, because previously people say, no one's going to catch me. They don't know who I am. This is fine. This is safe. And hopefully what we're proving in the UK is that it's not safe anymore for them. It's not a safe space for them to operate. Slightly further afield, similar to Ivan, we've had some really good success in Spain. There's a lot of piracy in Spain which affects the UK because of the link between those countries, and Spanish law enforcement has been at the cutting edge of anti-piracy, I would say, for a few years now. And then closer to this part of the world, we had a fantastic piece of work done by the Thai police a few years ago on a network called Expat TV, and that was affecting the whole region. That case is due for trial towards the end of this year. So it's taken a long time, but the work that the Thai police did straight off the bat completely dismantled the network. And so we're hopeful for significant sanctions in that case when it comes along. And as you mentioned on your presentation, the job that the Thai police did on that Sakrin Sai website, we've never worked on a case like that before, I would say. The coordination that goes into 150 offices, 19 cities, is not, that's an unbelievable piece of work. That is cutting edge policing. So when it comes to how do you refer to law enforcement, do you get more reception in the UK to out here? And people often look towards the UK and say that's a standard that we should be trying to meet. The reality is that the Thai police with that raid have met that standard. It's often quite difficult to get law enforcement fully engaged in IP crime, and that's sort of fair enough in some ways because they've got a lot of murders to deal with, right? Or they've got a lot of terrorist stuff to deal with. So how do we put IP up that list? It doesn't just happen overnight. This is an educational and awareness program for law enforcement as well as it is for consumers. And so we fully expect to be... you don't just make a law enforcement referral and then leave the police to it and see them again in a couple of years' time. You know, we're there all the way with them. So for the Sakrin Sai stuff, obviously you were heavily involved in that. Mike's team were heavily involved in that. True Vision heavily involved in that. So it was a collective effort with everyone lending their own resource. That's the only way we can expect, I think, help from law enforcement too. We've also decided to take private prosecutions. So that means that we get law enforcement to help us with the first bit of the case, and then we kind of take it back and we prosecute it criminally ourselves. So we're not relying on the state to prosecute that for us. We fund that. It means that we can move a bit quicker, and it means we can control it. But it also means that at the end, if there's confiscation of criminal funds or criminal gain, quite rightly, the law enforcement agency that's helped us with that case get a share of that fund. So we can incentivize law enforcement to help us out with that. And I believe the same legislation is in Malaysia. It's not everywhere in this region, and that's one thing that I would strongly recommend happens, because immediately you're giving law enforcement something to aim for. So I don't think there's much difference in how you would approach law enforcement between the UK to Spain to Thailand. Everything is an educational process and an awareness process. It's quite complicated stuff, some of this. So it's only right that we help them along the way, and in return, hopefully, we both win.
Okay. I think people in the audience would understand the type of the emotions and the feelings of match day. You know, exhilarating, excitement, engagement. But it'd be interesting for them to hear what's match day like from a content protection standpoint.
Work.
So perhaps I'll open up for anyone on the panel who wants to jump in. But you know, if you could describe what's match day like from an anti-piracy perspective. What strategies are you putting in place? What technologies are you using? What's your focus?
From our perspective, the build-up to match day is probably the same as most rights owners. So we have been monitoring forums, we've been monitoring websites, we feed that all into our supercomputer, for want of a better phrase, and we are fingerprinting, of course, all our output, so that when match day comes along, we can match that fingerprint with the supercomputer, and we can find the streams and then hopefully take them down. We are notifying Google, we're notifying Twitter, we're trying to take things down from search, we're making people aware that we're going to be notifying them during the matches. So we're kind of doing that sort of build-up, and I would imagine that's pretty much the same for anyone. Where things slightly differ for us is that in the UK we have the benefit of this super block, and that is a court-ordered blocking mechanism which allows the Premier League to block streaming servers of content coming into the UK. So that doesn't matter whether you're going through an ISD, whether you're going through a website, whether you're going through Codina, it will be blocked. So when kickoff starts, we are telling the ISPs to block those streaming servers. Now, the reality of piracy is that it's so quick and it's so agile. What our block allows us to do is move with the piracy. So every 5 minutes, we tell the ISPs, go and look over there, stop that bit. Go and look over there, stop that bit. And that, in one fell swoop, has become the single best anti-piracy tool I'm aware of in the world. But what has enhanced it even more than that is the engagement and awareness of the ISPs. Because that is not a one-way conversation in the UK anymore. So we will say to the ISPs, go and block over there. And they will. And they're looking across their network. They're looking across their network. And then they see a spike. They'll say, there's a problem here. There's some traffic going on up there. Premier League, go and sort it out. So then we've got to try and race to find out where that's coming from. And it might be we can do that during the game. Probably more likely we're going to be doing it in the intervening period between the next game. But that two-way conversation has completely changed anti-piracy in the UK. And has made, I mean, I've no hesitation in saying piracy has never had it harder in the UK than it does now for football. And it's because of that conversation, because the ISPs hold the keys to anti-piracy. I 100% believe
absolutely.
that. And because without the ISPs telling us what's going on their network, how do we know where the problem is? We can make an educated guess. We can pretty much tell if it's on open websites. But increasingly, the hard stuff, the best pirated material is on closed network services, which means that you need a subscription for them. So the old techniques of trolling the internet don't work. And the only people who can tell us where the problems are, the real problems, are the ISPs. So unless you know what the problem is, how do you find a solution? So as well as match day, so I'm deviating from match day as I get on my ISP high horse, I think the ISPs are the most critical part of the anti-piracy question.
Has anyone else got any other tips and procedures on match day that differ from EPLs or pretty similar?
I think if you listen to Kevin's match day report, I think he mentioned the word ISP like 20 times. So ISP is the most important piece of the puzzle in all this. I mean, we can do everything they want, like the raid that you guys did in Thailand and all that. But if no one is telling us where it is, we can't effectively block it. And to be fair to Kevin, the two biggest ISP in the UK are also their licensees.
That definitely helps.
So yeah, they have skin in the game. But for us in Malaysia, that's slightly different, you know. we are not an ISP, and we have to get the ISP to work together and collaborate with us. If not, you know, it would just be, how do I say it? If we are losing battle, like we move 3 steps ahead but 4 steps back. So I would like to put this message out that we do need all the ISP to work together to combat piracy. If not, you know, everyone's just going to be wasting their time.
I think certainly this panel, and I think anyone who's in the content protection industry would recognize that ISPs are critical to any anti-piracy strategy. And in Asia, we may not have the sophistication that you succinctly alluded to in the UK, but we're having the conversation. And there are a number of ISPs in Southeast Asia which are, their whole business model has changed. They're now a key component to their business model is content, is live sports. And they can see piracy directly impacting their business. And they're certainly on the side of working against the pirates, working with the content protection industries to do something about it. And one of the things that they are doing and working with us on is site blocking. And you mentioned that quite unique form of dynamic site blocking that you have in the UK. You know, what we have in Southeast Asia is 2 forms of site blocking. One is judicial site blocking, you know, an application through the courts that Kevin was alluding to. The other one is a form of administrative or regulatory site blocking. And this is available in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Korea and so forth. But sometimes it's working, sometimes it can certainly be improved upon, because something that was very clear from what the way Kevin described match day is also not how sophisticated the anti-piracy technology and methodologies are, but also the piracy syndicates themselves are actually quite sophisticated as well. And sometimes in the administrative site blocking mechanism, it can be quite slow. So, Kevin, perhaps I could refer it back to you. You know, Malaysia, you know, the Malaysian government is taking online piracy very seriously, but is the site blocking mechanism working in Malaysia? Could it improve, and if so, how?
Site blocking certainly works, but there are, you know, many technicalities behind it. You know, there's dynamic site blocking, and you go through IP or you go through the DNS and all that. But like I said, we do need the regulators to form better guidelines so we move faster. The technology is there, monitoring as well as blocking and whatnot, but we do need regulation for us to move faster. For example, you know, after we report the infringement, we need to move fast because we are talking about live sports here. You know, we can't wait like 2 days or 3 days, and there's no point to do it then.
We're going to have to move on. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. But one of the other key areas is social media and search, especially social media. It's a platform that's unfortunately being abused, whether for live feeds or for short clips. So, Mike, what challenges do you face in the social media and the search sphere, and what more can some of the key IT players in this space, what more can they do?
Well, obviously, search is set up to have conversations between like-minded individuals. It's very something to the extent of accessing premium sports content for free is obviously something that people regularly talk about. So we've been working with all of the technology companies and the social media sites to try and, first of all, understand their business, but also let them understand our business and see if we can come together, because all of this really requires understanding about business, but it also requires cooperation and speed. And we've had, thankfully, some very good experiences with Google and with Facebook, both of whom have a rights management tool which allows us and the various rights holders to have a copy of the material available to them to be able to match, and we can move a little bit faster. Now, it's not perfect, and their business models in particular don't allow them to go as far as we would like, and so that conversation is continuing. And again, we're working with industry bodies. You and I sat with Google, with the Asian Video Industry Association, and we have an ongoing dialogue with them. I mean, I'll give you an example. In that meeting, we talked about the Pirate Bay. Historically, probably one of the biggest and earliest pirate organizations. And Google were unable to remove the references to the Pirate Bay from their site because it is a historical reference in many ways. But what they are able to do is to delist sites that are clearly infringing on sports rights and rights holders, that are encouraging people to access illegal streams. And so this is one way that we can start to do that. But at the end of the day, it's, you know, in some ways it's about education and education of the consumer. And that's actually probably one place where we do have an advantage, because with the blocking, the dynamic blocking in particular, what very quickly happens is that becomes the conversation. And once you start to disrupt a sports consumer's viewing experience, that becomes his biggest topic of the day. And so that starts to spread. And so the information, the education that piracy not only is wrong, but you're not going to have a good experience on a pirated site, and you shouldn't be wasting your money buying an ISD that may not work next week, is a really, really important message. And we'll continue to work with those technology companies and social media sites to ensure that that message is being put out to the consumer.
Okay, we're out of time, but before we finish, I just want to ask one very last question and just a short, punchy answer. It could be one word, it could be a very short sentence. So what is the most essential strategic component in the fight against online piracy? Kevin?
ISP engagement.
For us, it's technology. We are working really to develop the tools, you know, like to be able to support this fight against piracy.
Thanks, Ivan. CK?
Like I've said before, is the ISP collaboration, same like Kevin. And plus for us, it's also resources, because we are just a tiny country, Malaysia. I mean, if all the leagues get together, you know, take out a small percentage of the fees that I pay all of you guys, put in the pool and fight piracy, that'll be great.
Thanks. Mike?
Collaboration and cooperation. I think at the end of the day, winter is coming. It's time to choose.
So on that Game of Thrones note, I think we'll finish there. Thank you very much, my panelists, and thank you all for staying up after 5 o'clock. Thank you.